So recently I released a video where I was complaining about someone who was unprofessional and creating like hell in her own mind. And it was really frustrating, especially because other people weren't in hell. It was just her. She was in hell and she was being unprofessional on top of that. So I wanted to talk about a different incident where I was being unprofessional. I was being unprofessional, but I was in heaven. And it was a very different experience because I was the only one in heaven. Everyone else around me, they were just like, you know? So, and then we can talk a little bit about what being professional means. So I was in Mexico City eating Korean food. And living abroad, it's really rare that you can eat Korean food that seems close to the source. And sometimes when you eat something that calls itself Korean food that is not that close to the source, it's so painful. It's more painful than maybe just doing without the thing altogether. So I was in Mexico City eating Korean food that was close to the source, and I was just so excited. And I was just sitting there kind of like crying and being so grateful. It meant a lot to my human self. And I talked to one of the servers saying, hey, thank you so much. And I was just like kind of going off, like, you know, I told him much less than what was in my head, but what was in my head was like the Mexican culture is such a great, you know, like upholder of the Korean culture, because Mexican culture has barbecue in its like bones. And, you know, there's vaquero culture here, you know, cowboy culture that Koreans don't have. We have barbecue culture for sure, but we don't grow cows and stuff like that. So there's something about Mexican culture that makes it a really good steward of Korean food. And there was this guy tending to the fire in the back because he had to take like real firewood that he made himself and then use that charcoal to cook the meat. And that's not an easy job. He was just like with this blowtorch with all this like leña, which is firewood. I was like, oh my God, look at how hard he's working. And this is the traditional way to make Korean barbecue, not over a gas grill, over a charcoal grill. And I was like, holy shit, because of all these people's hard work and their willingness to work at a job where they're upholding a culture that's not their home culture, I myself get to experience this today. I was just like brimming with tears and just so fucking grateful. So I was telling the mesero, I was telling the waiter, like, thank you so much for having this restaurant. The food is very good. It is very close to the, you know, original Korean culture. And me as a Korean person, I'm so grateful to eat here, especially because I live in the campagna, the countryside. And he was like, well, thank you for coming. You know, thank you for being our guest. And he was very cordial, but I was just like really emotional, you know, and it was like, I think too much for him. And then I didn't get to reach the fireplace guy. And then I was like, telling him, could you please tell the fire guy, you know, the guy in charge of the leña, like, could you please tell him, like, I'm really grateful for his hard work and da 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 da. He's like, yeah, okay, sure. He was really weirded out by me. And so this is an example of me being in heaven. I was super, super in heaven and just showering people with gratitude that weren't necessarily ready to receive it. And it was not necessarily professional. Because professionality, in my opinion, is a mask you wear, especially in the West, that is not you. And you use this mask that's flattened down, right, to interact with other people, and they're flattened down masks. And the idea is you're not supposed to be too emotional and you're not supposed to be too personal, you know, that's the idea. And in some ways it keeps things safe. What I think is really interesting about this like professional mask is in the West, we rely upon this a lot. Like if you don't know how to be professional, we can't trust you. And I remember working at an office where there's like this girl fresh from college. She did not know how to be professional. She was acting so weird. She was like this untamed wild horse. And I was like, oh my God, she freaks me out. Like, what's she going to do next? You know? And she was just doing little gestures, but to me, I could tell she didn't know how to be professional yet. It's something that gets trained into you when you work in an office setting. When you are some spiritual hippie traveling all around the world, maybe you've never had a job in a professional setting. And it's very obvious in your emails. It's very obvious in how you hold space for your sessions. It's very obvious because you just don't know how to like put on that mask that people in the West are really used to, that is a signifier that like I'm safe in this kind of setting. So what's really interesting, I think, about living in Mexico is that there's, in my opinion, less professionalism that is expected, because the home culture actually has a lot of trust built in. There's a lot of trust, like, hey, pay me tomorrow if you don't have it today. There's serious trust that you will pay tomorrow, or even if you don't show up for an appointment, like you're supposed to cut the lawn and you don't show up to cut the lawn, that doesn't mean you've broken this relationship forever. There's just more trust. There's more of a sense of family. There's more of a sense of a human to human connection, where you don't feel automatically suspicious of the other person. Whereas in the West, especially in like a place, let's say like New York City, you never, if you need a pen to write something down, you don't ask someone, hey, could I please borrow your pen? Like, that is so out of line. Like, you would never ask that, because that would scare the other person seriously, and they'd be very suspicious of you. Whereas here, that would be very, very normal. You could go up to a stranger and say, I have like a $20 bill. Could you break it for me and give me small change? Even if that person, their change means something to them and they need the change for something themselves, they'll probably break it for you, because there's a sense of family. So the need for professionalism, I think, is not so relied upon here, because the trust is endemic. The trust is implicit. The trust is a part of the culture and how people relate to each other as humans. In the West, professionalism, this is just my opinion, is more necessary because there's very little trust. There's very, very little trust. And therefore, how strong someone's mask is a signifier as to how trustworthy they are. Like, are they very professional? Then they won't screw you over. Right? If they're unprofessional, then they will screw you over. Whereas here, it doesn't matter if you're professional or unprofessional. The screwing over, this is culture like any other. There's humans, and screwing over can happen, but the expectation that it's going to happen is very low to none. Like, there's very low to none expectation that the screw over is imminent. So, back to my being unprofessional. I was being very emotional, and I was just brimming with gratitude, and I forgot to draw a drawing, but basically what was going on was I was showering these people with so much gratitude. It was more energy than it was probably within their boundaries to receive. So because I was showering them with so much gratitude, it was kind of beyond their level of generosity. So I was probably pushing them outside of consent, because they could be generous to a point, and then what ended up happening was I switched the dynamic, and I started probably to them feeling like I was taking from them by making them hostage to my feelings, even though I'm just a customer in a restaurant. It was more than they wanted to deal with that day, and they don't care if it's feelings of gratitude. They just want to move on. They don't care if this Korean American Mexican lady is having feelings. So yeah, I wanted to share that. And if I had made my drawing, I would have shown you the drawing, how I had flipped the dynamic from being in a feminine position to a masculine position, and also pushed them outside of consent by having too much energy. And I was definitely unprofessional, but I don't care. I was in heaven. And honoring your personal experience, whatever it is, and being in your pleasure, even if it makes other people feel uncomfortable or ruffles their feathers, is an important part of boundaries. So I was in my boundaries. I apologize if they were not in their boundaries, but I think everyone knows it was all good vibes. All right, thanks for listening. I'll see you next time. And yes, I do give one-on-one sessions. You can ask me for a one-on-one session. The description, or my email's in the description box below. Bye.